The old colonial courthouse in Ouagadougou stood like a crumbling monument to forgotten power, its weathered stones echoing with decades of verdicts pronounced in foreign tongues, and within its suffocating chambers, young Ibrahim Traoré found himself seated in the defendant's chair, his calloused hands folded with quiet dignity despite being only 22. Judge Marcel Dubois, a pale Frenchman flushed with irritation, adjusted his black robes with theatrical importance, his disdain for Africans etched into every impatient glance he threw toward Ibrahim. "State your defense," he demanded in accented French. But when Ibrahim began to explain the land dispute that had brought him here, his rural accent bled through, provoking the judge's fury until he thundered, "Shut up, illiterate!" words that echoed like poison through the courtroom. The insult hung in the air, but Ibrahim's calm eyes betrayed a strength rooted far deeper than the judge could imagine. For beneath the surface of this trial lay the extraordinary journey of a boy from the village of Boudry, whose life had been shaped by ancient wisdom, relentless hunger for knowledge, and a gift for languages that would one day stun the world. As a child, Ibrahim rose each morning to the sound of roosters crowing and women grinding millet while smoke curled from cooking fires, and every evening he sat at the feet of his grandmother Aminata beneath the mighty baobab tree. With weathered hands working clay, she whispered proverbs in Moray. "Knowledge, my child, is the one treasure no thief can steal." Aminata, who had seen French colonialism push aside her people's tongues, carried within her the memory of older traditions where Arabic verses connected distant merchants, and her own father spoke 6 languages to trade across West Africa. She began teaching Ibrahim Arabic by lamplight, and when he stumbled over words, she reminded him that each language was a window to Allah. These seeds took root quickly, for Ibrahim's mind drank in words like parched soil absorbs rain. He walked 3 kilometers to the French-run school each day, where chalk dust clung to the air and grammar rules in a foreign language covered cracked blackboards. While other children struggled, he thrived, absorbing French with ease. And when he returned home, his grandmother encouraged him to practice Arabic script in the dust. Soon, traveling traders noticed the boy lingering by their campfires, his ears wide open as they spoke Wolof, Hausa, Dioula, and Fulfulde. One Senegalese merchant tested him in Wolof and was astonished at how quickly the boy responded. Another old Hausa trader gifted him a pocket dictionary, declaring, "You speak with the heart of our people." By the time Ibrahim was 15, he carried borrowed textbooks to the fields, reciting English grammar under his breath while working rows of millet. His peers mocked him as a dreamer, but he knew knowledge freed him from the boundaries of earth and sweat. In the evenings, he sought refuge in the village mosque where an aging imam, once trained in Cairo, guided him in Arabic calligraphy and Islamic scholarship. Knowledge illuminated his soul like stars guiding a desert traveler, the imam told him, and Ibrahim copied verses by lamplight until his hand ached. Villagers began to notice his gift. When disputes arose between speakers of different tongues, they turned to Ibrahim as translator and mediator. His grandmother, her strength fading, smiled with quiet pride. The seeds have found good soil. One day, an ancient land cruiser rumbled into Boudry, carrying Dr. Abdul Sankara, a renowned Islamic scholar who had heard rumors of a boy speaking Arabic with a theologian's eloquence. Before curious villagers, he conversed with Ibrahim for hours in flawless classical Arabic, testing him with Quranic exegesis and philosophical debate. Astonished, he spent 3 days probing the young man's knowledge and then, beneath the baobab tree, placed his hands on Ibrahim's shoulders and declared, "Within 5 years, your voice will be heard in places of power, speaking truth in languages that moved nations." With a letter of recommendation, Ibrahim gained a scholarship to the university in Ouagadougou, where his small dormitory room mattered little compared to the treasure of the library. There he devoured classical Arabic texts, French academic treatises, English literature, and even learned Swahili through headphones in the language lab. He practiced Wolof with Senegalese classmates, Hausa with visiting traders, and Fulfulde with nomadic herders on the city's outskirts. By his second year, professors paused when he spoke, for his multilingual grasp allowed him to frame questions with depth none expected from a village boy. When international diplomats visited, Ibrahim interpreted in real time Arabic, French, English, Hausa, Wolof, even Swahili, astonishing ambassadors with his seamless transitions. Yet despite offers from embassies, his heart remained tethered to his people. He returned to Budri for his grandmother's funeral, only to find his family embroiled in crisis. A powerful Franco-Burkina businessman named Henry Bouchard had arrived with forged documents claiming 50 hectares of ancestral farmland to build a luxury resort. Local officials, intimidated by his wealth and political ties, had sided with him, and Ibrahim's elderly uncle faced eviction. With a trained lawyer's eye, Ibrahim spotted irregularities in the paperwork, gathered witness testimonies in Morée, Dioula, and Fulfulde, and filed objections in flawless legal French. Bouchard retaliated with fabricated charges of forgery and bribery, and before dawn police stormed the family compound, dragging Ibrahim away in handcuffs. In the colonial courthouse, under the gaze of Judge Dubois, he now faced not only loss of land, but destruction of his reputation. Yet, as he stood humiliated before the sneering judge, Ibrahim carried within him the weight of his grandmother's teachings, the blessing of Dr. Sankara's prophecy, and the power of 9 languages waiting to erupt like a storm that no gavel could silence. The silence following Judge Dubois' furious outburst stretched like a taut wire, but Ibrahim remained upright, his calm dignity contrasting with the red-faced judge's arrogance, and when his lips began to move, it was not the broken French the court expected, but the crystalline beauty of classical Arabic prayer rolling across the chamber like music from the Quran itself. Gasps spread through the courtroom as his voice soared, each syllable perfect, and before the echoes faded he shifted seamlessly into elegant Parisian French, the kind reserved for philosophers and statesmen. The judge slumped back, his authority dissolving, while Ibrahim's prayer continued into the measured cadence of English, into Morée honoring his grandmother, into the musical Dioula spoken by traders, into the poetic rhythm of Fulfulde, into the rich trade tongue of Hausa, then Wolof invoking the griot's dignity, and finally Swahili echoing the unity of East Africa. 9 languages poured from him like a symphony, each carrying its own conception of justice, weaving together a tapestry of African resilience that shattered colonial prejudice. Observers wept as they heard their mother tongues elevated in sacred prayer, clerks dropped pens, attorneys whispered in disbelief, and the word illiterate now sounded like a cruel joke. When Ibrahim opened his eyes, he looked at the judge with quiet composure and said in flawless legal French, "Your Honor, I am ready to present my defense." What followed was a masterclass in law and language. Ibrahim dismantled forged documents, cited French legal precedents, explained cultural context in Morée for villagers, and cross-examined witnesses in their own dialects until they contradicted themselves. The prosecution's web collapsed, revealing Bouchard's conspiracy in brutal detail. By midday, Judge Dubois, humbled beyond recognition, dismissed all charges and ordered an investigation into the fraudulent land claims. The courtroom erupted with whispers that spread like wildfire, within hours reaching journalists, universities, and human rights groups across Burkina Faso and beyond. Social media buzzed with hashtags translating 9 languages, 1 truth into dozens of tongues. Recordings of the multilingual prayer circulated across Africa, inspiring students and activists. Professors added his case to lectures on linguistic rights. Imams cited him in Friday sermons about the power of multilingual worship. Embassies scrambled to respond as the story embarrassed colonial pretensions. Suddenly, Ibrahim was no longer just a village lawyer but a continental symbol. He established the first multilingual legal clinic in Burkina Faso, where cases were argued in clients' native languages before translation into French. Farmers from distant villages traveled to Ouagadougou seeking the lawyer of 9 tongues, while international NGOs consulted him on dismantling linguistic barriers in justice systems. He wrote articles in legal journals on how cultural fluency was essential for justice, spoke at universities across Africa, and trained young advocates to value their indigenous languages rather than abandon them. Within years, legal aid societies across West Africa adopted his model, and his influence reached international forums where he argued that justice demanded more than procedures. It demanded voices be heard in their own tongues. His foundation, named after his grandmother, provided scholarships for multilingual students and built clinics across 15 nations. 5 years after that fateful trial, Ibrahim addressed the United Nations General Assembly in 6 languages, quoting his grandmother's wisdom in Moray before a hall of world leaders, drawing standing ovations. Dr. Sankara, now old and frail, wept as he watched his prophecy fulfilled. Universities from Senegal to Kenya included Ibrahim's courtroom story in their curricula, while European and American institutions invited him as visiting professor. His autobiography, published simultaneously in 9 languages, became a bestseller and a required text in African studies. Meanwhile, his childhood village Budri became a pilgrimage site. The baobab tree, where Aminata once whispered wisdom, now bore a bronze plaque, and every year young lawyers gathered there to honor the roots of his journey. Even Judge Dubois, retired and shamed, spent his last years writing letters of apology to African communities. The once colonial courthouse in Ouagadougou, where Ibrahim had been called illiterate, was transformed into a museum of linguistic justice, hosting annual events where cases were argued in multiple African languages. Ibrahim's story became legend. University students recited his 9-language prayer as a symbol of intellectual pride. Activists carried banners inscribed with, "Every voice deserves to be heard in its own tongue." His legacy extended far beyond law. It was about dignity, justice, and the reclamation of African identity long suppressed under colonial systems. And so, from a barefoot boy listening to his grandmother under a baobab tree to a global advocate whose words moved nations, Ibrahim Traoré proved that the greatest revolutions need not begin with weapons, but with language itself. His 9-tongue prayer, born of humility and discipline, had transformed a courtroom, inspired a continent, and redefined the world's perception of African intellectual power.